Hi everyone, welcome back to Texas Government 2306. I am going to finish up the Texas Constitution today, and we will discuss solely the current Constitution as it is in place in the state of Texas today. So the Constitution we're talking about is the Constitution of 1876. In 1875, a convention was called to rectify the shortcomings of the 1869 Constitution, and each delegate was selected by popular vote. 40 delegates were members of the Grange. 75 were Democrats and 15 were Republicans. 6 were African American. These framers agreed on a constitution with 4 major themes. The first theme is strong popular control of state government. What this means is that the governor's appointment powers were limited, and that public officials, such as judges, would be subject to election by a then white male electorate. Limited state governmental power was the next subject area. What this did is executive powers would be diffused, meaning they would be spread out among several executive office holders. The legislature would only be part-time and would meet biennially, meaning every other year. Legislators' salaries were lowered. The judicial branch would be elected rather than appointed, and finally, government actions were limited by the Constitution. Next, economy in government. What this did is the Constitution restricted the extent to which state government could tax and incur debt. Limits were placed on office holders' salaries. Also, compulsory education was eliminated and education was decentralized so that white landowners did not pay for the education of what were then African American students. Next, we see the promotion of agrarian interests. This constitution reflected the presence of farmers and Grange members at the convention. The new constitution included provisions protecting homesteads and regulating banks and railroads. Finally, it is important for you to note that the Constitution of 1876 was a painstakingly detailed and rigid document that placed many restrictions on government. In that sense, this Constitution was a significant departure from previous Texas constitutions as well as the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution was designed to create a strong central government that would nevertheless be restrained and non-tyrannical. This means the U.S. Constitution is brief and allows for a great deal of flexibility. The U.S. Constitution is comprised of 7 short articles and has been amended 27 times and is 8 pages long. The Texas Constitution, on the other hand, was written with the intent to limit government authority and does so without any thoughts towards effective government. Since this was the mindset it was written with, it currently contains 17 articles and has been amended over 500 times. Only 3 other state constitutions have more amendments. The goal of the Texas Constitution was to create a very limited government to prevent excessive governmental power that could be used against the people. It was literally a reactionary document to the Republican Party-run government. So first and foremost, the Texas Constitution has a preamble. It is very brief and invokes the blessings of Almighty God. Unlike the U.S. Constitution, the Texas Constitution placed the Bill of Rights as its first article, so as to limit political power and prevent the abuse of political power. Article 1 indicates that all free men have equal rights that cannot be denied or abridged because of sex, race, color, creed, or national origin. Freedom of religion, speech, and the press is guaranteed. Individuals are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures, excessive bail, bills of attainder, ex post facto laws, and double jeopardy. Article 1 guarantees the right of trial by jury and the right to bear arms, regulated by the legislature. The article promotes the right to a republican government. Article 1 also contains provisions with concrete public policy implications. For example, Section 26 forbids monopolies that conflict with public interests. There is a general agreement among historians that the Texas Bill of Rights and other provisions guarantee the average citizen a greater variety of protections than most other state constitutions. Next is Article 2, which is the powers of the government. Article 2 divides the government into three distinct branches of government. There is one exception, and this is the Lieutenant Governor and the role he or she plays in the Texas Senate. Texas embraced separation of powers, which means there must be cooperation in the decision-making process between several institutions. This means checks and balances. Article 3 is the legislative department. Article 3 creates and puts the legislative power into two chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. We'll discuss formal qualifications and the manner of election for both the senators and the House reps at a later date this semester. Texas is much more restrictive relative to most states with respect to legislative salaries and sessions. Texas salaries are among the lowest in the nation, and Texas is one of only 5 states that has biennial legislative sessions. So if you want to be a state representative or a state senator, know that you are not doing this for the money. Article 4 is the executive department. The Texas Constitution divides the executive department into 6 distinct offices, 5 of which are elected. Our Constitution limits the chief executive's directive authority and his or her budgetary power, meaning they can recommend a budget to the legislature, but that is the extent of their power. However, the Texas governor does have veto power over legislation, including the line item veto. But the governor lacks both the reduction veto and the pocket veto. Texas is one of the few states which does not have gubernatorial term limits, and we will learn more about the executive department, or in this instance, all of the people that make up the executive department, further down this semester. Next is the judicial department, or the judicial branch. Article 5 discusses the court system. It creates our justice system and provides for lower courts. It allows the legislature to create courts as they are needed. Finally, this article discusses the court's jurisdiction, compensation of judges, and election of judges. Remember, in the state of Texas, all state judges are elected. Article 6 deals with suffrage. This article states who may vote in Texas and how to conduct elections and registrations. Other than filling elected office, voters can only decide directly on three other matters: constitutional amendments, a state income tax, and legislative salaries. Continuing with the current Constitution, we arrive at Article 7, which is education. Article 7 deems public schools necessary to promote a Republican government. It declares the legislature's obligation to maintain an efficient system of public, free schools. Also, it provides for the creation of a state board of education. It also discusses in detail elementary, secondary, and university education operations. Article 8, Taxation and Revenue. This article grants the Texas legislature the power to tax individual and business income. Moreover, Article 8 stipulates that revenue garnered from an income tax must be dedicated to education and tax relief. Remember, in the state of Texas, we do not have a state income tax. However, should a state income tax ever be voted on by the Texas voters, that income tax must be dedicated to education and tax relief. Article 9 deals with the creation of counties, organization, and operation. 10 is the railroads, and basically this is the regulation on railroads. Now, like Article 9, Article 11 is the municipal corporations. Now, when it comes to municipal corporations, what we are talking about is the creation, organization, and operation of towns and cities. Municipal, of course, means local. This is your city government. Article 12 is private corporations, And this, like the municipal corporations before it, Article 12 is referencing how corporations, how you file charters and how you get your business registered with the state. Continuing on to Article 13. Now, Article 13 was repealed. It is no longer enforced, but this article dealt with the specific regulations of Spanish and Mexican land titles. Remember, the state of Texas was a territory of Mexico and by extension of Spain, and therefore once Texas became a state, we had to try to figure out a way to convey land titles that had originally been given by the Spanish government and the Mexican government. Now, Article 14 deals with public lands and the land office. Public lands and the land office are, of course, under the purview of the younger Bush. He is the General Land Office Secretary or Commissioner. This deals with the lands that are owned by the state and that are considered public lands. And the land office, they are the ones in charge of maintaining and keeping contracts, leases that deal with Texas land. Now, Article 15. As in the U.S. Constitution, the Texas Constitution also discusses impeachment. Article 15 explains there must be a formal charge by the House of Representatives and then a trial by the Senate. The Senate has the power to try all executive and judicial officers. So should any of the executives, any of the Texas executives, as you will find out later on, Texas executives, this means more than just the governor. There are a long line of people that are considered Texas executives. So they would fall under this impeachment article. Article 16 happens to be a general catch-all article. This article is charged with grappling with issues from oaths to community properties to stock laws to banking corporations and more. So if something does not fall into any of the other articles, this is where it lands, which is under general provisions. Finally, what we have is Article 17, and Article 17 is the mode of amending the Constitution of Texas. I have included a link to a copy of the current Texas Constitution so that you can see not just all these articles, but all of the amendments that have been passed and or presented for passing. Now, the mode of amending the Constitution of the state is a four-step process. We can amend it in this manner. First, the legislature proposes an amendment. Then, the amendment must be approved by a two-thirds vote in both the House and the Senate. The amendment and the explanatory statement must be published in each recognized newspaper in the state. Finally, the amendment is then voted on and must be approved by the majority of state voters. Finally, we come to recent attempts to rewrite the Texas Constitution, and we are speaking about attempts to actually rewrite the entire Constitution and have a new Constitution. We are not talking about amending certain articles or certain provisions. This would be a let's just redo everything from the beginning situation. Now, the Texas Constitution, of course, has been amended many times since 1876, but it has never been completely rewritten. We do have two attempts that I have written down here. The first one is it's called the Sharpstown Scandal and the failed 1974 constitutional reform. I have given you links in the live PowerPoint online if you are interested in reading more about this situation. Basically, what it came down to was that in the wake of the 1970s bribery scandal, a group of reform-minded Democrats were elected to office. A constitutional amendment allowing the legislature to sit as a constitutional convention was ratified by the voters, and in 1974 the convention met to draft a new constitution. Of course, highly mobilized interests made compromise impossible, and the two-thirds vote necessary to approve the Constitution failed. In 1975, legislators attempted to rewrite the Constitution through the normal amendment process, but the voters rejected the proposed amendments. So what we have here is a bank fraud. We see a bribery scandal, which led to multiple persons that were in the legislature being indicted, and ultimately the legislators' attempt to rewrite the Constitution, of course, failed. It is a long, convoluted mess, but you could read up on each of these situations that led to what is called the Sharpstown Scandal. Their second try was not until 1999. This is called the Ratliff-Junell proposal. Again, I have provided a link in the live PowerPoint online so that you can read up on it. These are quick reads, all of them. It shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes to read up on them. What this one did was both Bill Ratliff and Rob Junell proposed a new constitution that would have given the governor additional appointment powers and reduced the number of elected executives, officials, and judges. The legislature would have remained a part-time legislature. The length of the legislators' terms would have increased, but the new constitution would also have imposed term limits. Not surprisingly, this proposal did not pass. What we will talk about more as we get further along in this course is that term limits are a key component, or the lack of term limits are a key component of not just the Texas legislature, but of judges and of the executive branch in Texas. Lastly, I have provided you a link to constitutional amendments, the over 500 constitutional amendments that our Constitution of 1876 has have been added to. Please remember, all attempts to completely revise the Texas Constitution have failed. If you are interested in learning about the amendments that currently are attached to the Constitution, feel free to click through and follow the constitutional amendments link that I have provided you in the live PowerPoint. It is interesting to see what people want to see changed and what they deem to be important. So be sure you check it out. If anything else, it gives you an idea of what we are dealing with when it comes to Texas government. So here we are at the end of Texas Constitution. This is, of course, the end of the second unit for Texas Government 2306. If you have any questions, as always, please reach out, email me, and I will be more than happy to provide you with an answer. Or if you have any comments, let me know. Tell me what you think. Y'all have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.